The notification sound from my laptop made my blood freeze. I'd been working late in my home office, debugging code for our latest software release, when Marcus's iCloud account synced to my computer by mistake. One folder caught my eye. Operation Buyout. At that moment, I realized this wasn't an investor report, but a plan to erase me. Inside were 47 documents I'd never seen before. Meeting transcripts with our investors, financial projections with my name conspicuously absent, and an email thread going back 8 months titled, "Removing David from the Equation." My hands were shaking as I opened the first document, and everything changed. To understand how devastating this betrayal was, you need to know how Marcus and I built this company from nothing. I started coding when I was 14 because I had to. My father's construction business went under that year, and watching him sit at the kitchen table surrounded by unpaid invoices and foreclosure notices taught me something about depending on other people for your future. I taught myself Python from library books, and by 16 I was building websites for local businesses for $50 each, making more debugging enterprise software on weekends than my father made in a month. The tech meetup in downtown Portland was my escape from a dead-end job writing database queries for an insurance company. January 2018, third Thursday of the month, same community center. I'd been going for 6 months when Marcus walked in wearing a wrinkled button-down and carrying a laptop held together with electrical tape. He introduced himself as a business development guy, stuck writing reports for a logistics company that treated him like office furniture. We grabbed coffee after the meetup and talked until 2 a.m. about building something that mattered. Marcus had connections I'd never seen before, former colleagues who'd moved to venture capital, college roommates working at tech accelerators, a network built over years of corporate happy hours and industry conferences while I'd been writing code in my bedroom. I could build anything, but I'd never figured out how to talk to investors or navigate board meetings. Marcus spoke their language fluently, discussed market penetration and scalability metrics, like a native speaker. We started meeting twice a week in my garage. Marcus would arrive with legal pads covered in business projections while I mapped out database architectures on my whiteboard. The idea came during one of those sessions when Marcus mentioned how his uncle's roofing company still tracked jobs with paper forms and Excel spreadsheets. Small construction companies were stuck using software built for corporations or managing everything manually. We saw the gap immediately, a project management system designed specifically for contractors, plumbers, electricians, landscapers. Those first 8 months we lived on instant ramen and shared ambition. 16-hour days became normal. Marcus would handle client calls while I wrote code. I'd debug integration issues while he pitched investors over lunch. My garage became our world. 2 folding tables, a space heater, and that taped laptop that somehow kept running. Our partnership agreement was signed on the same folding table where we'd planned our first features. 50-50 ownership split down the middle. Marcus would handle business development, investor relations, and board management. I'd run engineering, product development, and technical strategy. We shook hands before the lawyers arrived with the paperwork. Marcus said trust was more important than contracts. I believed him completely and never questioned his word. By September 2019, 12 beta clients. By December, 200 paying customers. By summer, contractors across 5 states were using our platform, reaching a $50 million valuation within 4 years. The garage became a memory, replaced by a converted warehouse in the industrial district with exposed brick walls and standing desks. Our team grew from 2 to 47 employees. Marcus hired a PR firm that got us featured in trade magazines and business journals. The friendship deepened through shared stress and success. Late nights debugging critical issues turned into conversations about everything except work. Marcus was the best man at my wedding. I helped him move into his downtown condo. We'd grab drinks after board meetings and laugh about how far we'd come from that community center meetup. He knew my code better than anyone else in the company. I trusted his judgment on deals worth millions of dollars. Marcus managed our relationship with the board of directors, while I focused on building features customers actually wanted. He'd handle the quarterly presentations and investor updates while I worked on the next version release. The division of labor made sense. I was better with algorithms than small talk. He understood market dynamics in ways that escaped me entirely. Looking back, the irony was perfect. While I obsessed over code quality and system architecture, Marcus was building something else entirely. Every late night I spent optimizing database performance was a night he spent cultivating relationships I knew nothing about. Every board meeting I skipped to fix bugs was another opportunity for him to shape narratives I never heard. My dedication to creating the perfect product blinded me completely to what Marcus was constructing behind my back. But even the strongest partnerships can develop cracks when you're not paying attention. The unease started building during a Tuesday in March, when I walked past the conference room twice and heard Marcus talking about operational restructuring with someone I couldn't identify. Both times he lowered his voice when he saw me. 20 minutes later, he emerged looking like he'd just finished the most important conversation of his life. When I asked who he'd been talking to, he said it was just a preliminary discussion with a consultant about scaling challenges. 2 weeks later, he brought up professional management during our weekly strategy meeting, saying we needed experienced executives with Fortune 500 experience. I reminded him we'd always managed fine with our flat hierarchy. Marcus nodded but mentioned board expectations and used phrases I'd never heard from him before. Leadership scalability metrics, optimization of human capital. The words felt foreign coming from someone who used to sketch business plans on napkins. The pattern became clearer over the following months. Marcus started having investor meetings without me claiming they were just relationship maintenance calls or preliminary discussions about future funding rounds. He mentioned them casually after they happened, had lunch with Thompson from the venture fund, coffee with Rodriguez about market conditions, quick drinks with the pension fund guys, always framed as routine check-ins that didn't require technical input. When I suggested joining the next one, he said it might overwhelm them to have both founders present for informal conversations. Marcus hired 3 consultants that summer without running it past me first. A leadership assessment firm to evaluate our management structure, an operational efficiency expert to review our workflows, a strategic planning consultant to map our 5-year growth trajectory. Each engagement cost more than some employees made in a year. When I asked about the budget, he said the board had pre-approved consulting expenses for organizational development. I'd never seen those board minutes. Marcus said he'd forward them, but never did. The questions about my technical decisions started small. Marcus would ask why I'd chosen one database architecture over another in front of the engineering team. He'd wonder aloud if we were moving fast enough on feature development compared to competitors. During product demos with clients, he'd apologize for bugs that hadn't existed in previous versions. The subtext was always the same. Maybe David isn't making the best choices for the company anymore. Maybe we need fresh technical leadership. Maybe the CTO role requires different skills at this stage. The conversation that changed everything happened in September, after I'd returned from a conference in Austin. Marcus suggested we grab dinner to catch up on what I'd missed while I was away. Over expensive steaks at the restaurant he'd picked, he explained how the board had been discussing role clarity and organizational structure. He thought I might be more valuable focusing purely on technology strategy rather than splitting time between technical and executive responsibilities. Chief Technology Officer instead of co-CEO. Still crucial to the company, but specialized in what I did best. He made it sound like a promotion disguised as a lateral move. The confusion hit me first, followed by the sting of being sidelined from my own company. I started noticing how important budget discussions happened when I was visiting clients and board presentations were scheduled during conferences I'd committed to months earlier. The internal conflict grew stronger each week. Marcus was still the same person over beers after work. He'd ask about my weekend plans and remember details about my family. We'd laugh about inside jokes from the garage days and complain about difficult clients like we always had. But in professional settings, he'd become someone else. Strategic, calculating, speaking in corporate language that felt rehearsed. I started wondering if I was paranoid or if my instincts were trying to tell me something important. The worst part was how smoothly he managed the transition. Nothing felt dramatic or sudden. Just a gradual shift in dynamics that happened so slowly, I almost convinced myself it was natural company evolution. Marcus would defer to me on technical matters while subtly undermining my input on business decisions. He'd praise my engineering skills while questioning my understanding of market dynamics. Every conversation chipped away at my authority while reinforcing our friendship. By December, I realized Marcus hadn't just been excluding me from decisions. He'd been systematically repositioning me in everyone's mind as the technical founder who'd grown beyond his capabilities, the brilliant programmer who didn't understand business realities, all while maintaining the facade that we were still equal partners building something together. I began to wonder, was I the only one who didn't see what was really happening? It was nearly midnight, and every fix had drained me until that chime made me freeze. Marcus's iCloud account had synced to my computer by accident, probably because we'd shared the same Apple ID during our early startup days, when we couldn't afford separate developer accounts. Most of the folders were exactly what I'd expect: client documents, meeting notes, financial spreadsheets. But one folder name made my hands stop moving across the keyboard. Operation Buyout. I opened the folder with the methodical approach I used for debugging complex code. Started with file creation dates to understand the timeline. Sorted by document type to identify patterns. Read through each piece systematically like I was tracing through a program to find where the logic broke. 47 files total, revealing the most sophisticated betrayal I'd ever seen. The timeline Marcus had created was a masterpiece of strategic planning. 8 months of careful orchestration, laid out in a spreadsheet with color-coded phases and milestone dates. Phase 1 was relationship building with key board members. Phase 4 was execution and transition. Each phase had specific tactics with completion dates and success metrics. Marcus had approached my removal like a software development project with sprints and deliverables and testing phases. The transcripts from investor calls made my stomach turn. I found a conversation from June where Marcus described me as brilliant but naive about business realities. And this was only the beginning. Each subsequent call built on the previous one, creating a narrative I'd never heard but apparently everyone else had been discussing for months. The financial projections and draft press release hit me like a double punch. Our company was valued at $80 million with detailed breakdowns that looked legitimate until I reached the equity distribution section. Marcus owned 67%. Board members and investors held 28%. Employee stock options accounted for 5%. My name appeared nowhere in the ownership structure. 4 years of building the company together, and I'd been completely erased from the cap table. The press release felt like reading my own obituary, announcing my voluntary transition to an advisory role to pursue new entrepreneurial opportunities. It quoted me saying things I'd never said about being excited to step back from day-to-day operations. The date was set for 2 weeks from today. I scrolled through an email thread titled David Problem Timeline that included Marcus and 3 board members. They discussed the optimal timing for my removal to minimize disruption to pending deals. Thompson suggested waiting until after the Q4 board meeting. Rodriguez recommended accelerating the timeline if I showed signs of resistance. Chen proposed a severance package that would prevent legal challenges while ensuring my complete departure from the industry. The clinical tone made it clear they were discussing a problem to be solved, not a person who'd built the company from nothing. The buyer meetings shocked me more than anything else. Marcus had been having conversations with 4 potential acquirers over the past 3 months. Each meeting was documented with detailed notes about their interest level and proposed valuations. He'd positioned himself as the sole decision-maker who could deliver a clean acquisition without complications from technical co-founders. The notes mentioned how much easier the deal would be once organizational changes were complete. The consulting agreement was hidden in a subfolder marked Personal Legal Documents. Marcus had already signed a 3-year contract with TechFlow Solutions, our biggest competitor. The agreement made him their chief strategy officer, starting December 1st with a base salary of $400,000 plus equity. The contract included non-compete clauses that prevented him from working with our current clients, but carved out specific exceptions for accounts he'd bring with him. The effective date was exactly 2 weeks after my planned removal from the company. I sat in my office at 2 a.m., staring at evidence that this wasn't an emotional decision or a friendship gone wrong. Marcus had spent 8 months methodically planning the theft of everything I'd built while maintaining the facade of partnership. Every conversation about the company's future was a lie. Every decision I'd trusted him to handle had been an opportunity to advance his scheme. But this was just the beginning of what I'd discover. The names in Marcus's documents led me down a rabbit hole that revealed the full conspiracy. I started with Thompson, Rodriguez, and Yamamoto, the 3 board members who appeared most frequently in the email threads. Cross-referenced their names with our company's expense reports and found a pattern that made my chest tighten. Marcus had been taking Thompson to dinner at Le Bernardin for $5,000 a night, 11 times over 6 months, all expensed as business development meetings. The expense reports revealed something more disturbing than expensive meals. Marcus had been offering these board members investment opportunities in his personal ventures while feeding them carefully crafted narratives about my mental state. Thompson received shares in a real estate development fund Marcus was launching, then started questioning my irritability during recent meetings without noting that those meetings happened when critical system failures demanded my immediate attention. Rodriguez got early access to a tech startup Marcus was advising, then highlighted my absence from investor dinners without explaining that I was debugging code until 3 in the morning. Each board member was promised future financial benefits in exchange for supporting my removal from the company I'd built. Marcus had been interviewing my replacement for 2 months. Stephen Walsh, a former colleague from his previous job, had already signed a conditional offer letter for my exact role with a 20% salary increase. The timing was set for exactly 2 weeks after my planned removal. The financial paper trail exposed how Marcus had been funding his conspiracy using company resources. Conference travel budgets inflated to cover private meetings, consulting fees, padded for legal advice about removing founders, marketing expenses that included payments to a PR firm specializing in corporate restructuring. Marcus had stolen approximately $200,000 from our operating budget to finance the campaign against me. Our legal counsel had been compromised through Marcus's manipulation campaign. The law firm we'd used since our Series A funding had been convinced that I posed a liability risk to the company's future growth. Marcus had shared selective information about my technical decisions framed as evidence of poor judgment and resistance to professional management. The lawyers had begun drafting documents to protect the company from potential founder disputes, without realizing they were enabling the dispute Marcus was creating. The forged documents were hidden in a subfolder marked Confidential Legal Backup. Marcus had created fake email threads showing me expressing doubts about my long-term commitment to the company. Fabricated meeting notes, where I supposedly questioned whether I wanted to continue in an operational role. Fictional conversations with recruiters about opportunities at other companies. Each document was backdated and designed to support the narrative that I was already considering leaving voluntarily. Sitting in my office at 4 in the morning, my heart pounding as the full scope hit me, I understood what Marcus had accomplished. He'd turned my own company against me using a combination of financial incentives, psychological manipulation, and outright lies. 3 board members believed I was unstable and uncommitted. Our legal counsel thought I was a liability. My replacement was already hired and waiting in the wings. Marcus had constructed a reality where my removal seemed not just justified, but necessary for the company's survival. The cruelest part was how he'd used my dedication to building great software against me by positioning my focus on technical excellence as evidence that I couldn't handle business responsibilities. But as I stared at the evidence spread across my monitor, my mind started racing through possibilities Marcus hadn't considered. He'd been methodical, but he'd also been sloppy. Every document he'd created, every lie he'd told, every dollar he'd stolen was now documented on my computer. Marcus had handed me a complete blueprint of his betrayal, and my programmer's brain was already identifying the vulnerabilities in his plan. I realized my debugging instincts were exactly what this crisis needed. Marcus had approached my betrayal like any complex problem requiring systematic analysis and strategic solutions. I had advantages he didn't know about. He'd planned for months, assuming I was the same naive programmer who trusted handshake agreements and focused only on code quality. What he didn't realize was that discovering his scheme had transformed me into someone capable of playing his game better than he could. I secured every shred of proof across multiple servers, then mapped each lie to the real records, built a comprehensive timeline that connected Marcus's actions to specific dates and financial transactions, organized everything into categories that would make sense to lawyers, investigators, and board members who didn't understand technical details. The original partnership agreement contained a crucial error in Marcus's legal strategy. Our company had been incorporated with specific founder protection clauses, requiring both founders' votes for any changes to executive roles or equity positions. Marcus could manipulate 3 board members, but he couldn't eliminate my voting rights without my explicit consent. The 2 board members Marcus hadn't corrupted were Sarah Chen, a pension fund director, who'd always quietly questioned budgets, and Robert Kim, a university endowment rep who never warmed to Marcus's charisma. I reached out to Chen first through encrypted email sharing selected evidence of Marcus's expense manipulation and equity promises. Her response was immediate and furious. She'd suspected financial irregularities, but hadn't understood the scope until seeing the documentation. I scheduled the emergency board meeting through strategic misdirection, claiming we needed immediate approval for a time-sensitive client partnership opportunity. Marcus was enthusiastic since it aligned with his timeline for demonstrating business leadership capabilities. While Marcus focused on his removal strategy, I'd been developing something he knew nothing about. The core algorithms that powered our construction management software were based on patents I'd filed personally before we'd incorporated the company. Those patents covered the scheduling optimization and resource allocation methods that made our product unique in the market. I'd spent 3 months creating a new software architecture that improved on our existing system while remaining completely separate from company assets Marcus thought he was stealing. The SEC investigation started with a single phone call to their corporate fraud division. I provided documentation of Marcus's expense manipulation, forged documents, and misrepresentation to board members about company finances and leadership decisions. The investigator assigned to the case had experience with startup fraud and immediately recognized the pattern. Within 48 hours, they'd opened a formal investigation with subpoena powers for company records and communications. Marcus's own timeline became the weapon I used against him. His documents showed he'd planned the confrontation for mid-December after securing additional board support and finalizing his competing job offer. I realized I could accelerate the entire process by forcing the confrontation 6 weeks early. His conspiracy wasn't complete yet. The forged documents weren't fully integrated into official company records. His replacement hadn't started work. Several board members still had questions about the leadership transition timing. The conversation with TechFlow Solutions. Our biggest competitor was the easiest call I'd ever made. Their CEO had been watching our market success with obvious frustration for 2 years. When I explained that Marcus was already under contract with them while attempting to steal our company, they immediately offered funding for legal fees and investigation costs. They wanted Marcus exposed as a corporate criminal before he could deliver our client base and technical secrets through fraudulent means. I secured backup funding from 2 other sources within a week, a venture capital firm that specialized in founder-friendly investments and a private equity group that had been tracking our growth since the Series B round. Both were eager to support a case that would set legal precedent for protecting technical founders from business partner manipulation. 3 days before the emergency board meeting, I understood what Marcus had actually accomplished. His betrayal had given me everything I needed to take complete control of the company and eliminate the governance structure that made his conspiracy possible. The evidence he'd created would destroy his reputation permanently, while the legal precedent would protect other founders from similar schemes. But my biggest weapon remained hidden. Those patents would shift the entire power dynamic in ways Marcus couldn't imagine. Thursday morning would change everything. The boardroom felt different at 9 a.m. Thursday morning with hushed whispers and the steady tick of the wall clock marking each second. Marcus walked in carrying his leather portfolio and coffee from the expensive place downtown, looking completely relaxed. He dressed for success in his tailored navy suit and Italian leather shoes. Thompson, Rodriguez, and Yamamoto filed in next, talking quietly among themselves. Chen and Kim sat across from them reviewing notes on their tablets. Our legal counsel, James Morrison, arrived last, apologizing for running late from another client meeting. I opened my laptop and connected it to the conference room display system. Marcus was checking his phone and making small talk with Thompson about their weekend golf plans. Everyone expected to discuss partnership terms and revenue projections for 30 minutes before returning to their normal Thursday schedules. The projector screen showed my desktop with a single folder visible: Operation Buyout. Marcus looked up from his phone when he heard his folder name announced. His face went from casual confidence to deer-in-headlights terror in the span of 3 seconds. I watched him scramble mentally, trying to figure out how to pivot as the first document appeared on screen. The email thread titled David Problem Timeline with his name in the sender field and detailed discussions about removing me from the company. The systematic presentation focused on the 3 most damning pieces of evidence: the forged press release announcing my voluntary departure, with quotes I'd never given; the expense records showing unauthorized payments to bribe board members; the timeline spreadsheet with color-coded phases for my removal, laid out like a project management plan. Each document displayed for 30 seconds while I provided context about Marcus's systematic betrayal. The board members fired questions in rapid succession. Chen demanded to know about company funds used for personal entertainment. Rodriguez wanted to understand when leadership changes had been discussed without his knowledge. Yamamoto questioned why his name appeared in compensation documents he'd never seen. Kim asked about meetings with potential buyers. Thompson pressed for details about the consulting agreement with our biggest competitor. Marcus tried to deflect by questioning the source of the documents. He suggested I'd fabricated evidence to create a crisis that would distract from my own performance issues. He mentioned my resistance to professional management structures and my tendency to prioritize technical perfectionism over business realities. His voice got higher as he spoke faster, trying to maintain control of a narrative that was disintegrating in real time. At 9:47 a.m., exactly when Marcus thought he was regaining momentum, I revealed the SEC investigation. Federal subpoenas had been served that morning for all company financial records and communications. Marcus's face went completely white as he realized his expense manipulation and document forgery had attracted federal attention. Morrison immediately asked whether he needed to recuse himself from representing the company, given the potential criminal implications. The uncorrupted board members turned against Marcus within minutes of learning about the SEC involvement. Chen stated that Marcus had clearly breached his fiduciary duty by misrepresenting facts to fellow board members. Kim pointed out that the expense irregularities constituted fraud, regardless of Marcus's motivations. Rodriguez admitted he'd been suspicious about recent changes in board dynamics, but hadn't understood the scope of manipulation until seeing the documented evidence. Morrison confirmed that he'd been misled about my mental state and commitment to the company. The legal concerns about founder instability had been based entirely on information Marcus had provided without independent verification. The document suggesting I was considering leaving voluntarily had never been reviewed by Morrison, despite Marcus's claims that legal counsel had advised immediate action. Marcus made one final attempt to salvage the situation by claiming he'd been protecting the company from my inability to scale with professional growth requirements. He insisted that everything he'd done was motivated by genuine concern for employee welfare and shareholder value. He suggested that my discovery of his planning documents proved his point about my paranoid and unstable behavior patterns. The board vote was unanimous, and Marcus Chen was immediately removed from all executive positions, stripped of his board seat, and escorted from the building by security, while his corporate access was terminated remotely. I leaned back in my chair and let out the breath I'd been holding for 8 months. The company was mine again by 10:30 a.m. Security escorted Marcus to his office to collect personal items, while Thompson, Rodriguez, and Yamamoto sat in uncomfortable silence processing how completely they'd been manipulated. Chen was already on the phone with her legal team discussing fiduciary duty violations. Morrison was frantically taking notes about his own liability for providing legal advice based on falsified information. The SEC moved faster than anyone expected. Marcus received formal charges for securities fraud and corporate malfeasance within 6 weeks. Thompson, Rodriguez, and Yamamoto faced their own legal consequences for accepting personal financial benefits in exchange for supporting Marcus's scheme. Thompson lost his position with the venture capital firm after an internal investigation. Rodriguez faced SEC fines that effectively ended his career in corporate governance. Yamamoto negotiated a settlement requiring him to resign from all board positions and pay restitution to our company. I restructured the company's governance within 30 days of Marcus's removal, implemented quarterly financial audits by independent accounting firms with direct reporting to board members, created founder protection clauses requiring supermajority votes for any changes to executive roles or equity distribution, established expense reporting systems with automated flagging for transactions exceeding normal business parameters. The new policies made it impossible for anyone to manipulate board members or misrepresent company finances without immediate detection. 3 months after the confrontation, I realized Marcus's betrayal had actually strengthened the company in ways that normal growth never could have achieved. His conspiracy had exposed every weakness in our corporate structure and forced us to implement protections that most companies never develop until after they've experienced fraud. The legal precedent we'd established attracted attention from corporate lawyers and business schools who wanted to study our case. Within months, our stock shot up nearly 50%, and the Wall Street Journal ran our story as an example of how technical founders could protect themselves from business partner manipulation. The publicity brought unexpected investor interest from groups that specifically valued founder integrity and technical leadership. 4 venture capital firms reached out offering funding for expansion with terms that protected my control over technical decisions and company direction. Clients who'd been concerned about leadership stability signed long-term contracts after seeing how decisively we'd handled the internal crisis. The construction software market recognized that our company was now led by someone who'd proven capable of protecting shareholder value against sophisticated threats. Revenue growth accelerated as customers gained confidence that their data and business relationships were secure with us. I implemented an employee ownership program that gave every team member equity participation based on tenure and performance. The program ensured that people who contributed to our success would benefit financially from company growth, while creating loyalty that couldn't be purchased or manipulated by competitors. The shared ownership structure made it impossible for any individual to accumulate enough influence to threaten company stability. Mentoring other technical founders became an unexpected part of my routine after the case gained national attention. I spoke at accelerator programs about recognizing early warning signs of partnership manipulation, advised startup founders about implementing governance structures that protected against internal threats. The conversations revealed how common Marcus's tactics were in the startup world and how few founders understood the legal protections available to them. The transformation was complete 18 months after I discovered Marcus's betrayal folder on my laptop. The company that had nearly been stolen from me was now more valuable, successful, and secure than it ever could have been under the partnership structure Marcus had exploited. I'd gone from a naive programmer who trusted handshake agreements to someone who understood that even the closest business relationships require legal safeguards. My technical skills and methodical approach had saved not just my company, but everything I'd built from nothing. What I learned about human nature during those 8 months would change how I approached every relationship moving forward. Today, I understand that serious money reveals who people really are when $50 million sits within reach and only one person stands between them and complete control. The same methodical thinking that made me good at debugging code saved everything I'd built from someone I'd trusted completely. Trust is essential in business partnerships, but verification protects what trust cannot guarantee. What would you do if you discovered your partner's betrayal documented in black and white on your own computer? If you've experienced professional betrayal or partnership manipulation, share your story in the comments below. Subscribe if you value stories about justice strategy and protecting what you've built from people who would steal it.